Recording is on.
Well, hello everybody. Today we are having a conversation with George, and I would like if George could introduce himself first, and then we'll kick in with a few questions on the topics that we were planning. Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm George. Thank you for welcoming me to your group. I hate talking about myself. I'm just going to keep it short. I'm a writer, scientist, and human, most of all. It's a pleasure to meet the late Lord Hugh's circle of friends. I had some really amazingly dense interactions with him in the past, and it just feels like such an honor actually to almost kind of be with him today. I said I was going to be short, so that's it.
That's fine. That's fine. We were listening to. Well, I was listening to your last talks with Hugh, and I listened to the one that you had with Michael Dowd recently. And I remember that one of the topics that you introduced, that you talked about with Hugh and with Michael Dowd, is the human place in this world. The human. You more or less said that humans didn't have a real ecological purpose, and at the moment we are talking about the consciousness and the role, and who are we, what are we there for, what is our. I will read later on a little phrase that our friend Gary has sent to, but I would like maybe to start the conversation on this, and if anybody else has something to add before we leave the floor to George.
Well, shall I start? I mean, if we are asking, it's a fair question, I guess, to ask. Now that more and more of us can see that, Earth is coming to a head, civilization is coming to a head. It's going to be something else. Maybe it's not going to completely, end, but the whole planet is going through what is going to be a very, very rough time for every one of the 8 million species on the planet. So that's not up for dispute. I guess it is a fair question to ask, what is then our purpose? What is consciousness? What I mean, is it? My short answer is purpose is a construct. It doesn't exist. We don't have a purpose. I'm really sorry. You're gonna have to die disappointed. There is no purpose. What I always say is, as humans, our purpose, if you want to put it that way, is to simply exist. And that should be enough. That should be enough. And the problem is that it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for us. We wanted more. We wanted to prove that we are the best species on Earth. We wanted to, tear down the whole tapestry of these 8 million species and just build it up again, make it, of all of human threads. Whether it's, the materials that humans make, plastic and radioactivity and metal and all these things that you see in the cities. We wanted to just create it all from scratch. So it's really a narcissistic question to ask, what is our purpose? There is no purpose, but that's okay, because we are part of, even today, as things are collapsing, we are still part of this tapestry, this amazing tapestry. And I remember in one of my essays where I came to the conclusion that our purpose is to be a mirror, to simply reflect all the beauty that is around us. And just by being part of this beauty is an honor, should be an honor for us, rather than a jumping point to feel, oh, I'm inadequate. I want to be more. I don't want to be like the squirrels or the trees because I've got this massive brain, you know. I don't. So the minute we started looking down on all the other 8 million species, that's when things went wrong. When we regarded ourselves not as a mirror, but as a TV screen, as another world that you go into, and it's a human only world, it's a monoculture, and nothing else matters. So this is where we actually completely, and I'm going to leave it at that because I'm probably inspiring lots of thoughts. This is where it all went wrong, because we're not part of an ecosystem anymore. The mirror is broken.
Yeah. Great. I agree totally that our purpose could be just existing. And I would ask you, you know, sitting here now, 2022, with some kind of collapse in the near future, would you agree, or in any way, that our purpose now, as let's say enlightened or collapse aware humans, that our purpose now could be to find a way for us to go back to being an animal or an ecological animal, and accept it and manage it also? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think
Mm.
this would be our best bet, to go back to the things we know. You know, it's funny because I have this conversation with my mother sometimes, and she really gets it. She's from another generation where, you know, I grew up in Greece, and Greece in the last 50 years has gone from here to here. It's called the Greek miracle. There were like 5 decades of massive economic growth and massive ecological collapse at the same time, with tourism and everything. So my mother has actually seen through her life go from no electricity, no nothing, making their own food at home, to this artificial life. So she actually knows it even better than me, although she's not in the circuit of climate activists. And what she always says is it's really simple. It's going back to being more like an animal, not consuming so much, not destroying so much, living in balance with Earth. But I I would love to say that this is now our purpose of the collapse aware people, but the collapse aware people will never be enough to shift this society that is hostage to capitalism in a way that we only exist to be unhappy. This is what our economic system wants. It wants us to be unhappy so that we keep buying stuff. And as long as we are unhappy, we are asleep and we don't know what's happening to us. We are running, doing these jobs to get this money, to spend this money, and still we need more stuff. So we need to work harder. So we go through this cycle, this, what do you call it? A hamster wheel. And it's asleep. It's, we're moving, but we're actually completely asleep. And you can see that it's getting worse and worse and worse. You would have thought that the worse the climate gets, now we have this heat wave in Spain, which is quite unusual for June, but the more it happens, you see how the more we fall asleep. So it's really, to me, I hate to be a pessimist, but it's the worst case scenario. I used to think 5 years ago that when the climate gets really, really bad, and when the wars begin, when the food crisis begins, when the inflation begins, people are going to start waking up. Now, people are going to fall into even more sleep because this will be a survival mechanism. And I hope I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. You're completely right. I think people are going more and more into their denialism the more obvious, the more I find myself being a long-term doomer, going, aha, you know, this is true, this is all happening. Look at the collapse of this and the failure of that and the war of so and so. Yeah, the people are just less inclined to get with it. And yeah, where does that leave us is a very good question. Where does it leave the poor doomers? What are we going to do?
Yeah, I would say that we are running to stand still. You know, to quote U2, one of the U2 songs.
Love that song.
Yeah, and I'd like to draw a parallel to what you said about Greece, because that sounds very much like Norway, where I grew up, right? So like 50 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, we were this, you know, mountainous skiing, farming country, like pretty poor, one of the poorest in Europe. And then over just the time I've been alive, since we found oil and stuff, we'd gone filthy rich and disgustingly oil soaked. And when I see my classmates, you know, from high school and stuff, they have picked up no ethics. So it's just, okay, all this wealth is around, so I'm just gonna build a giant house, a giant mansion, and I'm gonna have 2 or 3, you know, cottages and a house in Spain and whatever, or Greece. And it's like, yeah, we came out of the 1980s, 90s high school with absolutely no ethics. You know, only a tiny few people had any sort of ecological sense of right and wrong, and the others are like, yeah, I have this money, so I can spend it, right?
Yeah, it's the same story in Ireland. Ireland has a long story of poverty and colonialism by the UK and all sorts of deprivation, and then suddenly in the 80s the money from the EC came, and also all sorts of other financial companies from America started to establish themselves here, and suddenly something happened called the Celtic Tiger, which completely changed people totally from, like you said, Torstein, little farmers who suddenly started buying apartments in Spain, and complete craziness. Actually, it did collapse more or less in 2008, but the habit was taken, and the cultural heritage and the respect for the sacred was gone, or the sacred, I'm talking about nature, was gone, and the respect for our seas, our oceans. We gave away our fishing rights in exchange of subsidies for intensive farming. You know, it is just totally what simple, how do you call it? Fishing with little boats disappeared. You know, everything is started to. But anyway, to come back to what you were saying about the role of humans, and I'm just going to just very quickly read something that Gary sent us. And he said, regarding George's comment to the effect that humans have no biological purpose here, perhaps our meaning is extra biological. It needs a physical basis, but can encompass more. And he writes a comment that somebody wrote on our sub, saying, self-reference, consciousness is the most wondrous, inexplicable miracle of the known universe. And this is what we do. The awareness of awareness of awareness. People look at me strangely, but if you go to that place, that's it. That is beyond the mind, the language, and that is our human godness, our potential, our ultimate purpose and reason for being. There's a lot in there, but Gary and ourselves have had this conversation for the last 2 weeks, really a lot about this, and what you talk about being a mirror. He is more insisting on the fact that we are maybe the only creature that has awareness.
I wouldn't. I think it's a continuum. I wouldn't say we are the only creature, and also because there are different versions of awareness and there are different languages of awareness. We tend to think, I think, sometimes of awareness in human terms, and I have a feeling that there's probably a creature out there that speaks a completely different language or has a different thought pattern that we don't even understand. And we know the sentience of so many animals now, the octopus, the dolphin, all these animals. So I think it's more of a continuum rather than us being apart from all other 8 million species. Although at face value, when you look at human civilization from space and what it has done to Earth, you see all these cities lighting up, kind of almost like infecting a petri dish. You realize, wow, just one of these 8 million species has done all this. So, I mean, I don't disagree with what you read. I actually thought it's very hopeful. You would think that with this level of self-awareness, we would be able to transcend the mess that we have brought ourselves into.
Yeah. But isn't that all we can do as doomers too? Is this transcendence actually that we need to get to this stage now, because we've lost. We know we've lost. We know we've destroyed everything. But I don't think we should fall into species guilt, because that is the road of the cynical, is the road of the nihilistic. And I see a lot of that online with some doomers, we are a parasite, we need to disappear, we are this, we are that. I don't think that is either a good avenue to follow.
I've written blogs with that in mind, and it's something. It's I think it's a rite of passage that you have to go through in your thought process as a doomer. You go through the depression, you go through the self-hatred. As a biologist myself, thinking of all the species that I personally feel responsible that I've made extinct as a human being on this earth, I can't help but think, well, I'm not going to shed more than a couple of tears if we go extinct. It's just our turn, and you get it's karma. But coming back to the concept of awareness, self-awareness, and intelligence, if we put ethics aside, guilt aside, this is right, this is wrong, because there is value in looking at things in a very cold scientific way, because in nature actually there is no ethics. This big fish eats the small fish, and it's all a balance. The question, I guess, that I have is, could things have ever turned out differently? And I don't think they could have, because once you have a species that becomes super intelligent, this is what happens. You have the birth of civilization, you have a population explosion, because there is no predator for this species. And you have this, I guess, selfishness, which again is not selfishness, because this is what happens when a predator is super intelligent and is able to overcome all other predators. So I don't think that this could have happened any other way. And we need to, I think, accept that. We need to accept that intelligence itself, which we do have and is a beautiful thing, is generally not good for planets.
Yeah.
You often said that it's this maladaptation of the brain, this alien cortex. That's the problem of all our evils. That we're clever, but we're not wise. We've, as we've said before, as Gary you were all alluding to, we've abstracted our environment. We've divorced ourselves from that natural world, probably because at one point there were big cats that were eating us, but we enclosed ourselves, didn't we? We divorced ourselves, and that has led us down this unstoppable route that was impossible to probably come back from. But I don't know, I still kind of feel like there was points where we could have rolled back slightly. I don't know, I feel like maybe the last generation that has the most to blame is probably the boomers, the baby boomers. But how could they stop themselves? I don't know, it's difficult. it's like we talked about that meeting they had in the 70s. Was it the limits to growth? And Hugh often said that he thought that was the point when the elites they knew that was the point. Well, they knew there was, if it didn't stop there, then, well, it was already too late, basically. So, I don't know what you think about that, but...
I love that.
Maybe the solution to what Sophie talks about guilt and feeling guilt about our species is to kind of separate different concepts in our thoughts, because just like South Africans were not the apartheid system, human beings as an animal is not the industrial society. We were something else for millions of years, and in my thought anyway, we are going to be something else, separate from the industrial system. So what I would suggest is that we can condemn the industrial civilization. Of course, there are lots of kind of good things like art and science and different things that are not necessarily bad in themselves. Poetry, literature, music. But we have to realize that the system that we've built on this planet, which lights up the planet at night, can be seen from space, is not a good or ecological system. But that doesn't mean that we as the constructors of that system are necessarily all for it or all bad, because it's like, you can be a minority, like the ecological minority in Norway. You can be counterculture, like many people are, and basically our entire history as animals on the planet is different from these past 300 years, and also different from the past agricultural 10,000 years. So I just think we have to sort of separate what aspects are bad and what things are good. And I don't think it's humans per se that are the bad guys. Yeah, not really clear, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, look, the system that we live in is bigger than us. It's bigger than the human. We are all hostage to it. Look at us. We're, video conferencing from laptops that we have to plug into the wall to get electricity. That we're dependent on, the stocks of the energy market. There's no way to get out of that unless we completely, pull the plug from the wall. And no one's going to do that. I'm not going to do that either. I like my digital music too. I listen to Spotify like 8 hours a day. I'm just, I'm a music maniac. The system has become bigger than the humans, and it is almost a sentient system now. It is this industrial capitalist. It's almost sentient, Even when you now go online to buy something, you get recommendations. There's actual AI that is driving the system, that is, making bets on the stock market that is, it is increasingly bot driven to perpetuate profits and, the exploitation of humans themselves. Because the concept behind capitalism was to create products and sell them. And I sell you some apples and you give me some cows, and we're happy. It works like that. We exchange stuff. But what happened in the end is that we now are the product. We are the ones that are being farmed, propagated, exploited, and paid a salary as a compensation to think that we are actually winning something out of the situation, but we're actually not. we're surrendering everything to the system. And I guess, going back to awareness and meaning, and this is why we're not happy. This is why we're increasingly unhappy. And this is why we're increasingly wondering, what are we? What's our purpose? The minute a human is starting to wonder, what is my purpose? I don't know. It's a little bit of if you were really happy, you wouldn't even be asking that question.
Yeah, that's true. Jason, would you like to talk about Hugh's alien cortex? Because I know he has introduced that to George. Maybe George doesn't remember, or maybe he does, but it was more. Would you have a little word on this, Jason? We can't.
I can give it a little go, but I mean, I don't know. Were you ever familiar with some of the videos that Hugh produced and talked about this maladaptation to the brain through probably early Neanderthals breeding with other early humans, and then that led to this this new the most recent part of our brain.
Your sound is very bad. Maybe there's something you can do with your microphone. Your sound.
Sorry, is that a bit better? Sorry, apologies. I'm on the phone. Yeah, I think he came up with this concept. I mean, it's basically I think it's the neofrontal cortex, isn't it? But Hugh had this. He labelled it the alien cortex because it's alien from the other base layers of the brain. He often used that psychological. It's a very old the layered brain theory. You probably know, George, since you're a biologist. Through you have the fish, the mammalian brain, the lizard brain, all of these very ancient layers of our brain, and this most recent part of our brain has come about, and it's led to everything we see before us, everything we've created. So in many ways, incredible, that it allowed us to invent tools. That was the first thing, and then of course pattern recognition, and to develop hunting methods, and just to completely manipulate our environment. And it was brilliant in many ways, but then of course it led initially to farming, and then the ultimate divorce. And it's the root cause of all our problems. And when you look at it through that lens, it kind of turns your world upside down. It was a very amazing insight he had, actually. It was quite genius. But I'm not sure if you were familiar with that.
I'm familiar with his coining of the term. For me, I think of it a bit more simply as processing power. So that if we think of the human brain as a computer, the minute you have this brain exploding, which basically happened over not a very long geological time, it was a mutation, and it was evolutionarily selected, because intelligence will always be selected very quickly by evolution. So it was unavoidable, and it's almost like, to me, kind of like nature discovering quantum computing. This was the sort of nature of the leap from the, I don't know, early ape brain to the human brain. You know, suddenly you have, you know, you're from artists, you have humans just going nuts, just, you know, just making sculptures, just like making music instruments. I mean, civilization came about, and we just did all these things because this brain, which by the way is the same, almost the same exact brain we have now as thousands of years ago. We are still exploring it. We are still actually uh, developing it, because it is, in a way, more than what we needed. So I guess this is a question Carl Sagan often asks, you know, will this happen in other planets? Would intelligence arise? You know, what are the ingredients that would result in a, you know, in a species like the humans arising? You know, if the dinosaurs hadn't been hit by an asteroid, would we then be here? Well, we don't know, but what we do know is that it did happen. It did happen, and it happened on a planet, and it happened within an ecosystem. So it's almost like a virus. Kind of something went wrong, and intelligence arose, and this became an aberration within the system. Um, and you can call it an aberration or a virus, or you can just say it was unavoidable, because the minute intelligence arises, the minute you have the alien cortex, then indeed you are super intelligent, but you're not wise, because evolution selects for survival skills. And what are the survival skills of humans? I mean, you know, clear out the forest, build the 3 houses. These are survival skills, and they were selected by evolution on this planet. This is how I justify it, and this is how I manage to sleep at night guiltless, thinking that, you know, hey ho, it happened. Because the question is, now that some of us know this, can we do something about it? Can we minimize the impacts, so that as much of this biological tapestry survives into the next phase of the planet, which is coming, which is going to be a very different planet, but it will be there.
So
Is the idea that we can do something about something the same fucked up twattery that we've been suffering from all along? Is that alien cortex, ego, over intelligent? I can't quite get my head around the question of whether, now that I am belonging to the group of the people who know the state of the world, or whatever it is, do I now have to do something about that, either as an individual or as a part of a group? Or I'm completely at a loss of how to process this feeling of a knowing that I can't share with anybody apart from a small group of apparent lunatics on the internet. Like what? And again, if you sort of take this view of like, yeah, there's no purpose. I mean, and I can sort of go into that quasi-religious or spiritual thought process of, maybe the purpose of humankind is that God gave you the right and the ability to be a massive asshole, and how do you not do that, right? Can you, having been given that right? So I could take a religious view and say, so it is my job, and you could have any religion really and interpret it that way. How do I take the ability to be an asshole and not be an asshole? And maybe that's my mission in life. And you could see that as a, like I say, a sort of given thing, or you could see it from a sort of non-religious point of view as just, well, you know, that's just how things evolve, blah, blah, blah. But the same idea, I'm an asshole, can I not be an asshole? If that, I don't know if that's a good way of framing it, but
No, I think that's a great word, asshole. I can say it too. Well, if I can speak as a friend, I know we don't know each other very well, but I'm really feeling your energy, because I've been there as well. I'm getting a sense that you're actually not a doomer yet. You're still hoping. You're still thinking that there is something that you can do. And you are putting a lot of pressure on yourself personally. I was there, and it's not good because you're not being nice to yourself. The way I got out of it is I gave up. I gave up. I became a real doomer, and all I can say is I feel personally lucky that I am enlightened and I can share this conversation here with you guys. But I think putting so much pressure on yourself that it's now upon you to kind of awaken everyone else. I mean, yes, we can awaken other people, and we gathered here today. We, obviously because we care. Yeah, we still care, however much we feel it might be a lost battle. But I personally don't like to put myself under so much pressure anymore because it can actually really get you down.
Yeah, I don't think I'm sort of feeling necessarily that under that sort of pressure. Yeah, I think I'm more transitioning away from that in some way. But I guess I'm still perplexed about what the consequences are of just the awareness of that. And I'm not disagreeing. Maybe I haven't quite. Yeah, maybe I can't quite wear the doomer hat, or maybe there is a lingering sense of can something be done, or even as an individual. So yeah, it's your personal response to the thing. Oh yeah, why not then? Oh, I'm going to go on a cruise around the world now. In that case, because all this can be done. It's very hard. Yeah, it's difficult to know how you process being.
Yeah, because
it's awareness.
really very deep in your existence once you have realized that the whole system, especially lots of us here that I think that because I also grew up in the 80s, and that was indeed, at least in my lifetime, the decade where the glass and steel corporate machine was like idolized, in the movies and like everything, get the big job, get the big car, get the big, that was, to me, that was the, that decade and the couple of decades before that, the baby boomers,
But now all of that's coming is, I suppose, my view on this is like, from a positive point of view, a positive collapse point of view would be that all of that is now teetering. I mean, it really is teetering on the brink. This was something actually I wanted to bring up with you because I know you've been very vocal in regards to the war in Ukraine, and obviously that war is always terrible, and I think I can speak for everyone in our group that we'd never want to be positive about the actions of Putin. But I think Hugh would probably agree with me on this, that the way to look at all of these things is that the world is running out of resources and things are accelerating now. So he would probably take an accelerationist point of view on this to say that that war is pushing the global financial system, what we've known, the Western Anglo-spheric global capitalist system, it's going to come crashing down. It already is now. We are actually at the tip of the bubble, and now we're going to see a completely global polar, like tripolar world developing. Russia has cut itself off from the Western financial system, and they had a huge amount of resources. So the West, what do we don't produce anything anymore. We just financialize our way into oblivion. We don't produce products. So from that point of view, it's looking pretty good. Like the economy is going to collapse. I mean, people are going to start waking up. I mean, I don't know what you think about that. It's a bit of a different way to look at it, but I would definitely look at that war as an economic war. I think Putin has seen the writing on the wall for a long time. They have known that, China, Russia, they've been stacking gold. They know that it's all a fraud. It's a big Ponzi, this Western economic system. And I think, if anything, that's the one thing that might make people realize we're going to go back to more localism. Things are going to be hard. I mean, fuel prices here in UK, they're getting insane now. It's definitely going to go beyond £3 per litre before the end of the year. I mean, small businesses are collapsing. It's, food prices. We're getting. I mean, India. We've had these heat waves, haven't we? It's we're definitely going to see mass die-offs soon. I mean, that's almost approaching wet bulb events. So I don't think it's terrible, but it's positive in the terms of, if you want to accelerate the collapse so that somebody survives, so that something survives. In that respect, it's good. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
If I can respond to Bob, is that okay? Because I think that I sense your question is sort of, now that I'm a doomer, what next? What now? What do I have to do now? And I think, to start with a negative, what you don't have to do now is to go out like a missionary to the entire world and, give the word of Jesus to everybody. That is something you don't have to do. So if that was something you were worried about,
no, don't worry, I wasn't worried about that.
no, but you don't, because it kind of doesn't matter if people know or don't know, because it's all gonna crash anyway. So
just forgive me for interjecting. I'm actually more scared of more people knowing, because I think that would launch an insane panic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over to you.
So the only thing there is to informing people is kind of helping people, let's say on a person-to-person level, and to help people realize what is ahead. But that doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be large scale. It can just be to help your friends or some relatives or something, I think. And other than that, I think it's more like an inner, personal, spiritual thing, mostly. Trying to reconnect with nature and Mother Nature and stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, that's very, very succinct to the point.
So what would be your position, George, on what Tom was saying about the war in Ukraine?
So I love that he brought about the economy, because that is number one. The economy is about everything. And to me, as a biologist, I think of economy in biological terms. So economy is not just about the human economy. It's about the wealth and the energy and the food chain across the planet. So the real economy of the planet, which is not the human economy, the earth economy, is collapsing now. And yeah, everything is connected. Absolutely everything that you mentioned is connected. The war, to me, the pandemic, everything is a result of overshoot of population, of nature exploitation, habitat destruction, everything, the Arctic, the ozone, the soil, everything is being degraded. And it is a very, very all-encompassing and complete deterioration across the globe, which to us, to our species, we only see the very, very last manifestation, which is the numbers and the economy and the price of petrol. But behind that, what lies is a very, very complex series of processes that have been happening for hundreds of years since the Industrial Revolution really accelerated. And because it is an acceleration, we are now the lucky or unlucky people that are really at that cusp where the curve of the exponential function is so steep that the difference between yesterday and today is as big as it was between today and 50 years ago. We are really at that cusp now. And to me, the number one thing that's on my mind is really the blue ocean event, because we have no idea what's going to happen, and it could be something absolutely massive that could actually be a point where we could say, oh, there was actually an actual collapse because the disturbance of the circulation of ocean currents like that by the breaking of the summer ice. To me, there is possibilities there that we might see something that is not like increasing heat waves. It might just be actually the year where something happens. And if it's not that year, it's going to be another year. So yeah, to me, the inflation is also a biological term. Inflation is when something, a resource, a food, sunlight, oxygen in the ocean, whatever the chemical entity that you're referring to, is becoming dearer and less less abundant. So it becomes pricey. And this is why we're now seeing this inflation, which, I mean, now they're saying, oh, it's not actually, it's going to stay for a few years. I mean, there you go. Society is going to possibly collapse next because people are already wondering, why should I even work? I can't pay my bills. I'm doing McDonald's in the evening and cleaning houses in the morning, and I still can't pay my rent. What's the point? Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and smash a bank. So societal collapse, the Mad Max scenario, is what I'm afraid of.
I wouldn't be so dismissive of mutual aid in terms of in times of horrors. There has been examples, and we've talked about that with Hugh a lot. I'm trying to remember the name of that writer who wrote about the Katrina event in New Orleans and how she described actually the enormous percentage of people who supported each other instead of what we imagine, looting and violence. So I think that's, we have to be, I'm not an optimistic or a pessimistic person. I'm just trying to just take a realistic view on human nature. And I think the Hollywood kind of post-doom or post-collapse scenarios are part of a fear-mongering thing to increase our unsettled kind of mind at the moment, and also it's not reality. Rebecca Solnit, that's right, that's the name of the writer, Rebecca Solnit, and I think she is quite right on this. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about kindness, and humans are both. They're both evil and kind. We have both of those things. We should never dismiss both. And it could be a wake-up call for a significant enough segment of the population, especially those that lose absolutely everything, to realize that now that they don't have phones, they're not hooked to social media, they're valuing the real meaning of relationships and things. And like we all did during the pandemic, we all had a bit of a wake-up call, didn't we? That maybe that will be big enough for us to at least help each other a bit and help nature a bit. But it really begins from within us first. I use the word kindness. It's a new word for me. It's a new word for a doomer and a guy like me who always looks at the glass half empty. But I really, it's my new favorite word, because we think sometimes of kindness as something altruistic, and when you unconditionally give something away, to a homeless person or to someone else. But to me, kindness is actually first and foremost being kind to yourself. That's where it all begins. And the minute that you become kind to yourself, then you realize, do I need to spend my money to get a new house? Do I need to work on that stupid job so I can take that house, so I can have even more responsibilities and be even more unhappy? It's I guess that's the question of the self-awareness, isn't it? Are we self-aware enough to be able to wake up? It's a big question.
Well, you mentioned overshoot a few minutes ago, and we've had this conversation quite a bit too between ourselves about antinatalism and having kids or not in time of collapse, because we have we came to a kind of a mitigated view on this. We had a deep conversation with you about this because there was a few young people in the group who were asking themselves seriously, were they going to conceive, have a child now? And I was wondering, would you share your thoughts on this, George, please?
I just look at the facts. The fact, what I mentioned before, that we don't really have a predator. We're the only species on the planet that doesn't have a predator. What does that mean? It means that we need to become the predator, not to kill our population, but we have the responsibility now to control our population, since we have removed all our predators. So we have this huge responsibility. And the only way to do that is to really be aware, conscious of how many children we're having. And but I mean, it doesn't matter now, but it's too late. It's too late anyway. But if this was a way, for example, to drastically reduce emissions, if we were having this conversation maybe 30 years ago, then maybe I would be a lot more passionate about it. Now it's way too late. But for me, what I always say is that the one biggest by far thing that you can do to help this planet is to not have a child. Because if you don't have a child, then you don't have to tell that child to consume less, eat less, destroy less, much less than how much you ate, you destroyed. Is that fair to that kid? To tell it that it can't live the life that its parents lived? No. You're asking way too much of that child. And I mean, even bringing it into this world now where we're expecting the Blue Ocean event is, to me, it's almost like child abuse. I kind of subscribe to that point of view. It's a little bit cruel. So, but like I said, it doesn't matter anymore because it's too late.
Well, you see, what we would say, Hugh would say, is that I don't disagree with you, but we're going from this point. You're looking at things from this point of view that has brought us here in the first place, which is control. And again, we talk about alien cortex, about the intellect, about this ego, this kind of horrible kind of tendency of our recent human evolution to control, to use rationality, to use cleverness against wisdom. So from this point of view, I would say maybe we shouldn't have such a view on having children. It's because if we start applying control, we're using the same thing, the same process that has brought us to this desperate place.
You see why it doesn't matter, because the control is not really with humans. The control is from the planet. So the planet is now going to reduce our population drastically, because the ecosystem and the resource economy within Earth, the oceans and the availability of biological life that we can eat and all of that, that will essentially limit our abilities. And we are we are already in a very precarious situation because we don't realize that our food supply is completely artificial. Everything is agriculture and caged animals. 97% of the biomass of animals is actually animals reared for human consumption. I mean, we are already living in a dystopia. We just don't realize it because of, obviously, we've been living within this culture, but there's no way that Earth could feed 8 billion humans, however many we are now, using permaculture or anything like that. So again, there's no way back, and it almost kind of doesn't matter to have the conversation: do we have or do we not have children? Because at the end of the day, as you say, we don't have the control. We think we have the control. And all this time, all these centuries, we thought we had the control until we ran out of planet, basically. We ran out of planet because now we need something like 3 or 4 Earths to feed these people. But as a scientist, I find almost a macabre kind of reassurance in the physical laws. And, we are limited by the, the volume and the land mass of Earth. We've used 40% of the land mass for agriculture. The rest, 60%, is mountains that we can't use, cities that are sterile, can't grow food there, and deserts. We've really pushed things to. We farmed and reared as much and farmed as much of this planet as we could have. And going back to the economy, the inflation to me is really the number one indicator that is now showing that any small little disturbance, like a war, the supply of wheat from Ukraine and Russia, is not able to be replaced somewhere else. It's actually even worse because you got a war in one place where wheat is grown, and then in the other place where you have wheat grown in India or whoever it is, you've got heat wave. So it's like the worst. It's the perfect storm.
Yeah, the planet setting limits, or Gaia. I'm sure you're familiar with the Gaia theory. I've looked into, or I'm sort of experimenting with thinking about Gaia or the planet as an ally, for this tiny minority of ecological people or collapse-aware people. So without sort of being religious about it or believing in it, like sort of a conscious entity, what do you think about having Gaia as a strategic ally in bringing this unecological civilization over to a post-civilized and more sort of increasingly more balanced world? Anyway, thinking about it
there's any other way.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like a rhetorical question. Gaia is our mother, and Gaia is something that we rejected as an ally. We separated ourselves from Gaia, and Gaia will continue to be an ally to anything that is able to eke out an existence on this planet, and Gaia will continue. This is the whole point of my latest climate fiction novel. It's very grim, but the kind of sort of positive message out of it is that you get new variants, new mutants in the ocean, new forms of life. You will have that, and you will continue to have that, and maybe until the next species that becomes intelligent and crashes the planet, and then you have a new planet again, and this cycle might repeat a few times until, of course, the sun becomes red giant and engulfs Earth, which is, you know, eventually what will happen. Yeah, I mean, Gaia to me is a goddess. If I can allow the poet inside me to speak, it's anything and everything. And I feel this is where I feel sometimes very angry. The fact that we never got that. We wanted to create our own Gaia, our own biomes within our farms and our greenhouses and our, I mean, the way that we're heading as a humanity is that however many humans will survive, they will be living on Earth in the way that human expeditions to Mars would live. So it will be so hot outside. We will be in these greenhouses living as aliens within our own planet. And this is the best case scenario, actually. But I could be wrong. Again, going back to my novel, this mutant that arises in the ocean, I think at some point there's different mutants, and at some point